before history was written. In 1942, World War II reached its most dangerous moment. This was not a year of heroic victories or confident speeches. It was a year defined by fear, uncertainty, and quiet panic among Allied leaders. At that point, victory did not feel inevitable. It felt distant, fragile, and possibly unreachable. The war was not moving toward a clear ending. It was drifting toward collapse. At the beginning of 1942, the global balance of power had broken apart. Nazi Germany controlled most of continental Europe and showed no signs of slowing down. Britain stood isolated, surviving only through vulnerable supply routes across the Atlantic. In the Pacific, Japan was advancing faster than anyone had expected, destroying the idea that Western powers were untouchable. The war had become truly global, and the Allies were losing ground almost everywhere. On the Eastern Front, the situation was catastrophic. The Soviet Union had barely survived the initial German invasion, but at an enormous cost. Millions of soldiers were dead or captured, entire cities were destroyed, and the country was fighting simply to stay alive. In 1942, Germany shifted its focus south toward the oil fields of the Caucasus. Fuel was the lifeblood of modern warfare. If Germany secured that oil, its war machine could continue indefinitely. Stalingrad was not yet a symbol of resistance. It was just another city that seemed destined to fall. Far from the battlefields, a silent war was deciding the fate of the conflict. In the Atlantic Ocean, German submarines were sinking Allied ships at an alarming rate. These ships carried food, fuel, weapons, and hope. Every vessel lost weakened Britain and threatened to cut the Soviet Union off from vital supplies. This was not a battle for territory. It was a battle for survival. If the Atlantic supply lines collapsed, the Allies could lose the war without a single invasion. In the Pacific, Japan appeared unstoppable. Its early victories created the impression that the United States and its allies were unprepared for a long and brutal war. Japan's strategy relied on rapid success, hoping to break American morale before U.S. industrial power could be fully mobilized. In 1942, this strategy still seemed realistic, and many believed the United States might not endure a prolonged conflict. Despite its enormous industrial potential, the United States entered the war inexperienced and unprepared. Soldiers lacked combat experience, commanders made costly mistakes, and early defeats exposed serious weaknesses. Transforming economic power into effective military strength took time, and time was something the Allies did not have. In 1942, the United States was learning how to fight a modern war, and the cost of that learning was paid in blood. What made 1942 truly terrifying was not a single disaster, but many unfolding at the same time. There was no safety net and no margin for error. If the Atlantic had been lost, if Japan had secured total control of the Pacific, or if the Soviet Union had collapsed, the war could have ended then and there. There would have been no recovery. The future of the world depended on fragile decisions made under extreme pressure. Then, quietly and almost unnoticed, things began to change. There was no dramatic victory and no sudden reversal. Instead, the Allies started to adapt. Production increased, coordination improved, intelligence became more effective, and long-term planning replaced desperation. The war did not become easier, but it became survivable. The Allies stopped reacting and started preparing. By the end of 1942, the Allies were not winning the war, but they were no longer on the edge of defeat. The worst had been avoided by the narrowest margins. Looking back, it is tempting to believe victory was guaranteed. In reality, the world came dangerously close to a very different future. And 1942 was the year when that future almost became reality. If you want to understand the moments when history stood on the edge, when the outcome was never certain, this channel exists for that purpose. Subscribe, and explore the wars that shaped the world, not as they ended, but as they almost ended.